Hello, friends, and welcome to a special episode of Weekly Witness. Don't worry, we'll continue our special series on Texas Impact's legislative priorities, but we wanted to take a short break today to talk about the upcoming election season, the October 11th voter registration deadline, and Texas Impact's new tools to help Texas congregations engage voters effectively this election season. Here for our casual conversation today, our Texas Impact's Executive Director, B. Moorhead. Hey, B.
Hey, Scott.
And Texas Impact's Advocacy Director, Joshua Houston. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Scott.
So, friends, spoiler, everything that we're going to talk about today is available online at texasimpact.org in the Election Center, or you can follow the link in the show notes. But we want to talk about 3 different tools Texas Impact has to help you prepare for election season. And B, I'm going to bring you into the conversation first because first and maybe most important, Josh might argue with that in a second, but one of the most important things you can do is make sure that Texans of faith are paying attention to the upcoming election season and are checking all of the things they need to do to create the plan. So B, talk to us about that first step, the first tool that we have to help Texans of faith and Texas congregations prepare to turn out the vote this November.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So the thing that we know about election season is always that everybody feels like they're pushing just as hard as they can to turn out the vote. And at the end of the election period, there's always people who say, oh, I didn't know for sure how to vote. I didn't know where. It just seemed overwhelming to try to make my way through all that information. So to respond to that concern, Texas Impact is partnering with a tool called Ballot Ready. It's an organization that's been around for several years. And what we have is a place on our website called an election center that has all of the information anybody would need to be an informed, registered, mobilized voter all in one place. So on our website at texasimpact.org/voter-assistance, you can find out who represents you currently, what's on the ballot in your district. You can check your voter registration, which people should be doing right now because the voter registration deadline is October 11th. So if you think there's some reason that you're concerned that you might not be registered at your current address or you have any kind of concerns, now is the time to be checking on that before the registration deadline. You can find out about mail-in ballots. And most importantly, probably for a lot of people, when we get closer to the deadline, you'll be able to see where you can vote and what the hours are that different voting locations have. So it's all really important information. You can research who's on the ballot and find those people on social media so you can get a better flavor for who you're going to be voting for. And you can actually put together a sample ballot. You can create your own kind of cheat sheet of what you want to vote for when you go into the voting booth. So it's all really helpful. And one of the things that I'm most excited about, and I know you are too, is it is what's called a relational get out the vote tool. That means that you can share it with your friends and neighbors so that they can also find out that information. And the way that you do that is we have a QR code and a link that you can share. And if you really get excited about it, we'll make you your own link and QR code that go to that same election center. So if somebody feels like they want to be a super get out the vote election mobilizer and they think they can mobilize, I don't know, Scott, how many people do you think you can mobilize? 500? 1,000?
Oh, we're going for 1,000.
All right. If somebody thinks they can beat Scott, they could...
Game on.
There you go. They could email engagement@texasimpact.org and request that we set them up their own unique link, and they'll be able to track how many of their friends and neighbors that they share the link with are going to our election center to check their voter registration and find out where to vote. And then at the end, if somebody beats Scott, I imagine Josh and I will award them a very handsome prize. Am I right, Josh?
Yeah, you bet. Scott's very competitive about that sort of thing, and it's always enjoyable to me when he loses.
I mean, you haven't been able to feel that enjoyment yet, so maybe one day you will feel that joy.
All in good fun for a good cause, as we say. So that's the first step of the process, is making sure that individual voters in Texas are registered and understand what to do to go vote themselves and to get their friends and neighbors mobilized to do so as well. But we can't, any of us, go vote if the apparatus of the election isn't already working as it should. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh to talk about other ways people can make sure this election is successful.
Thanks, B. Yeah, getting out the vote is critical. Also, making sure that the election is implemented smoothly and fairly is obviously equally critical. The thing that the election administrators of Texas tell us that they need, the number one need that they have, is for election workers or poll workers. They need people to actually sit there and work the polls. The election administrators' jobs have become very stressful, and that is because of the big lie. They have been inundated with requests for information, and that's the nice stuff. I mean, then in addition to having things like their personal home address is leaked in public, and all sorts of threats that they've received. So, just this morning, if you have heard us on any of our Faith and Democracy tour that we have made last month, you've heard us say this, and it's just super true. I mean, we have lost nearly 30% of our election administrators in Texas due to the abuse that they've taken. And that was reported in the Texas Tribune this morning. So there are three super important strategic reasons for you to be an election worker. First and foremost, if we don't have enough workers, then we have poll closures and poll relocations. And every time we have a poll close, not open, or open late, or be relocated, people get disenfranchised. There are people who have made a plan. Their days are jam-packed because they have childcare issues or they have inflexible work schedules. So polls not opening leads to people not being able to vote. 2, it's super important that we don't have any systemic failures in any of our counties in Texas. That will just lead to there being credibility to what is currently nothing more than a conspiracy theory. And then 3, finally, it's super important because if you are sitting in a group, like a Sunday school class, and there's somebody who utters the F word, fraud, you, having been an election worker, gives you the credibility to say, that's not how this works. Now, do you convince the crank that's uttering the F word? Probably not. What you're inoculating the community from is anybody possibly believing that that person has any credibility, because you have the credibility of having been an election judge and saying that's not how this works. Now, we understand that not everybody can dedicate this 12 to 16 hours necessary to be an election worker. Not everybody has the ability with their work schedules or whatnot and what have you. So the next best thing you can do, if you cannot work for the county, serve your county and be an election worker, is to be a poll monitor. Now, what a poll monitor is they are the eyes and the ears of the Election Protection Coalition in Texas. The Election Protection Coalition is a coalition of several dozen nonprofits, including Texas Impact, that all pool our resources to help monitor and legally enforce people's voting rights across the state when we have elections. The poll monitors stand 100 feet outside the polling location. They're out there with the people campaigning. And their job is simply to just kind of be friendly, be chatty, say, hey, how'd it go? And if you hear of any problems or any complaints from voters, you then call that into the hotline. The hotline then is where the lawyers are for the Election Protection Coalition. And then we begin to triage the problems that we have come in from the hotline and try to make sure that the election is implemented fairly.
Let's talk for a second about why this is so important right now in 2022 in October. B, I was listening to a podcast the other day that talked about how many people out there care a lot about these issues, but just aren't paying attention. Like, I'm sure most of the people who are listening to this podcast, like, know when the election is, know what's on the ballot, all those kinds of things. But most of the people in our pews don't. And for those who did attend the Faith and Democracy series, they saw Josh do a stand-up, sit-down exercise and saw that in a typical midterm election, like more than half of the room, more than half of the participants would be sitting down. They'd be sitting out the election. So why is it especially important that Texans of Faith are engaged, that congregations are engaged in making sure that people are participating?
Well, for a couple of reasons, gosh, a bunch of reasons. But I mean, I'll start with the one that is most central to our faith, I think, and that is our faith calls us to act in our daily lives. And one of the ways that we do that, one of the ways that we live into our teachings and preachings and prayers that we all can be as one, that we would live together in beloved community, is that we all take responsibility for running that community that we're all going to live in together. We're really fortunate in the United States to live in a constitutional democracy. It's still a very young form of government compared to the rest of the world, but it has already shown unique opportunities to bring people who have been long silenced in human history into the policy conversation, into the very middle of it. That's really important. And our faith teaches us that regardless of whether we win or lose, whether our idea prevails or not this time around, that just being in the public square, weighing in, that is the call. And if we're not answering it, then we've kind of stumbled before we even took the first step. Second, we know that right now in Texas, I don't think this is shocking for me to say, a lot of our public policy is being driven by, the squeaky wheels, a few people who have very extreme views, who are, because they show up consistently and they aren't shy about saying how they feel, and they aren't shy about telling elected officials who they are and what they want out of government, they are disproportionately able to bend public policy in the direction that they want it to go. That, poll after poll shows that's not what the majority of mainstream Texans, including Texans of faith, want for their community. But if people don't show up and say what they want, you can't blame somebody else for not knowing that that was what you wanted. So if we want a state that does care for the least of these, that does protect our children, that does show compassion to our seniors and people with disabilities, that is responsive to environmental concerns, that has fairness in our justice system, all of those things and more, we have to participate in the decision-making process and not just say, well, it seemed like the deck was stacked against me, so I didn't bother.
And Josh, similar question. I've heard you talk about it multiple times, but this is a really important election, not just in terms of results, but also in terms of like making sure that it happens appropriately. Anything you want to add there in this setting?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Scott. I want to answer it by backing up to a thing B said about, she used the term mainstream people of faith, and we should explain why we use that term. Because like my favorite show, Ted Lasso, we need mainstream people of faith to believe that they are actually the mainstream. So, and let's use data to prove it to them. The only religious group that believes the big lie are white evangelical Protestants. And even then, it's only 61% of white evangelical Protestants. It's the Christian nationalist subset of that demographic religious group. Let's look at Texas now. White evangelical Protestants are 15% of the state. Subtract out that 40%, and you're looking at maybe 9% of the state that's in that Christian nationalist category. Now let's look at Texas Impact's membership. When you look at our membership on our website, we are roughly 15% of the state. 12% are white mainline Protestant, 3% are Jewish, Muslim, or Unitarian. That gets you to 15% right there. Then you coalition build. You take the 8% of the state that's black Protestant, you're at 23% of the state. You take 1/2 of the Catholic Church on which you can make common cause with on any given issue, including bodily autonomy. You're looking at 37% of the state. And then if you take the unaffiliated, the nones, those that have left church or do not go to church or do not claim a faith, they're with you on almost all of the policy issues on our legislative agenda. That's 19% of the state. You're looking at 56% of the state right there. The point is that Texas need not be seeing the policy outcomes that we've been having. 2 of 3 Texans have been born here or moved here in my lifetime. It is a largely unorganized and disengaged state. You see that in the turnout in the data. And this tool, Ballot Ready, that we have that we've been talking about, it organizes and engages if you use it. We need not be seeing the outcomes we're seeing.
If you use it. So as we close out today, friends, I'll just say, in most of our weekly witness episodes, we kind of end a segment with asking a guest what folks' homework assignment should be. This entire episode today is your homework for the next few weeks, right? We have these tools for you and for people of faith to use, to engage, to bring to your congregation, to bring to your social networks. We need to be making sure that every person in our community is participating in this election process, and we've given you the tools you've been asking for. Our members have been asking for exactly this for years, and now you have it. So this is your homework. Go to texasimpact.org, check out the Election Center, email us at engagement@texasimpact.org if you have questions. But the time to do this work is now. The registration deadline is October 11th, and early voting starts soon thereafter. So we don't have a lot of time to wait to get on this important work. Anything y'all want to add before we close out today?
No, it's just such a timely topic. Thanks for making time for us.
All right, friends. Well, as we mentioned at the beginning, we will continue our legislative priority series. So make sure you're subscribed to Texas Impact's Weekly Witness. Make sure that you're sharing this content with your friends, and make sure that you and your congregation are members of Texas Impact. We'll look forward to seeing you next week, friends. The time to do this work is now. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.